morning everyone, it's Carol here at OHJ Journals, and I thought this morning that I would share with you the tags that I have made for my tag swap partners in the March OHJ Journals tag swap, which is currently live. If you want to take part in the next tag swap, the invitation video will go live on my channel on the 17th of April. All the information about what you need to do to participate will be detailed in that video on the 17th of April. Okay, so the tags that I've made for my partners this time round, I base them on the 3 suggested prompts that are always given out. You do not have to use either or all of those suggested prompts. I just chose 2 this time round. They're just literally, as I said, they are suggested prompts. So I based my tags this time round on this altered guest check. Now this was altered guest check number 17 in the first 50 stack challenge. I chose this because the 3 prompts for the tag swap, the first one was texture, and this one has loads of lovely texture on it. The second one was book page, and as you can see this has got a book page on it. And the third suggested prompt was a feature, and that is what is missing off this altered guest check. So let me show you the tags. I'll pop that one to one side because the tags are very, very similar to this one, as you can see. Well, these are the tags, as you can see. That's the second one. That's the third one. Then there's that one, that one, that one, and that one. So there's 7 tags here, all identical with the exception of the image on the front. And why are these different from this? Well, there is a feature on each of these tags. This is obviously my layering up, my texture. I went for a napkin over the top of some cardboard, which gives a nice texture. I've stitched around the outside edge of my image here. Then I layered it up on top of some vintage book page, which I inked around the edges. Then I laid it up onto some vellum, and as you can see, I've inked around the edges. Then there is a layer of voile, and I've used some more at the top here. There is a vintage handwritten document there, and then there is a card as the backing, which I have again stitched. So I was hoping that all of that would give some texture, and I've also left my threads loose again to give some hint of texture. So I've hit 2 of the prompts there in terms of the book page and texture. And if I flip this over, on the back you can see I've used paperclip there as my closure, and you could equally use another means of closure up here. You could use a magnet, you could just put a thumb notch up there, you could do a celery style closure with threads, and you could even use what is very much in vogue at the moment, which is a hidden paperclip. But I just wanted a very simple paperclip that was quite visible from the back, because I wanted my tag swap partners to know that there is a feature here, or a hidden feature. Now what I've done is I've glued all these layers together, but for the top layer I haven't glued a little central portion down here right at the back between the main card and all these layers here, and it obviously goes over the back. So if I pull this paperclip out, I've just done some lengths of voile to tie it in with the voile I've used on the front, and then if I hold my tag that way, you can see I've got a little gusseted pocket there. Now when I send these out to my tag swap partners, there will be some goodies in there for them, but I haven't put them in for you to see because that's between me and my tag swap partners. But similarly, as I said, if you don't want to do a sort of closure up the top here, you could do a thumb notch and just leave that open like that. I just wanted to have a little feature, as I've said, so that I could hit the prompt. So just to close it up, I've got my paperclip there, I've just centered it and popped it on there. So all of these are exactly the same on the back, and I've just done a little bit of collaging on each of them, nothing very ornate, just very, very simple. I've also done a little bit of stamping on all of them, so they're all the same on the reverse like that. And I've used book page again on the back, because the book page I use on the front to hit the one of the prompts isn't very noticeable. So those are my tags, and I thought I would do a very quick tutorial showing you how I pulled these tags together. So I'm just going to pop those to one side, and also what gave me the inspiration, which was my altered guest check. So as I say, off to one side. So I'm going to pull in here some bits and bobs that I have prepped ready. So I've got an image here. Oh, let me tell you before I get into this, the way I did these tags is, rather than work from the base tag forward in terms of determining my layers, what I did was I started with my central image. Now on all my tags that I will be sending out, the first layer is 2 inches across in height. Sorry, I forgot to measure this. 4.5 inches. So that was my first layer, and all I did from there on in was just rip my next layer marginally bigger. They're all different widths, as you can see. The vintage document I've used is a lot wider on either side than actually I've used on the book page or for the vellum, because I didn't measure. I just used the first piece, which I measured out properly, and then use that as a template for making the next layer slightly bigger. And I've worked from this image back to my base card here, and I've left this pocket until the last because of the gusset and making sure that it fit. So I won't be giving you specific measurements for creating this tag from here on in. What I've got here is I've got an image or part of a painting by Botticelli. I've got some vintage book page which I've inked round the edges. Then I've got a piece of quite stiff vellum, and this I actually cut with the decollage trimmer and inked round the edges. Then I hand tore a piece of vintage handwritten document. This is a French one, and this is the same as I've used for all the other tags. And as you can see, it's marginally bigger, and I'm not too bothered if it's gone close to the edge down here. It just adds to the distressed look of all of this. Then I've got a piece here of some voile, and this voile is lovely. It's got some little tiny dots on it, and that will be going behind like that. If I move this to one side, you might be able to see it on the grey here. Now I cut this quite a bit larger than this. It will need to be trimmed down, but I like to get all these layers in place and then trim it down. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to glue all these pieces together. One tip I will give you before I go any further is, if you want this sort of ruffled look, then you'll actually need to distress the edge of your vellum. So all I'm doing here is just rolling it a little bit so it curls up. This is quite heavyweight vellum. It's 155 GSM. You don't have to use anything as thick as this. This is what I like to use and I have in my stash. So I like how this holds its shape nicely. I'm just bending over the edge and pressing it down, and then just rolling it with my fingers to get it to look a little bit distressed. And the top corners I'm just rolling in towards me. I'm not bothered as well if this tears or rips, because it'll add to the texture and the distressed look of the tags. And there we go. But I found with this particular vellum, it's quite robust, to say the least. It really is. But but you don't have to use it. As I say, you could use a lighter weight vellum or whatever you have. Even tracing paper will work. Also, what I did with mine, before I actually put them on, I gently scrunched up the book text, but not very much, because this is very fragile. Yours might be a little bit more robust than mine, but I found mine was very, very fragile, so I needed to do it quite carefully, and I actually haven't done it on this one. So as you can see, when I pop it in there, it sits quite nicely inside the vellum. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue this to my vellum. And another tip, if you want to do this, is don't glue all the way to the edges. I have with my first layer, because I want that to lie flat, but with my other layers I have actually left a margin all the way around, and I'm just going to pop that in the middle, roughly eyeballing where I need it to go. And because I haven't glued right to the edges, I've got a little bit of movement there that I can get my bone folder under and just encourage that to lift and not lie flat, which is the look that I want. And I'm just giving that a helping hand. I also, with my tags, because I had covered a piece of card with a napkin, I decided to stitch all the way round and ink. But I'm not doing it on this one, so I'm just going to just tease that up a little bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and same thing again. I'm just going to roughly distress the edges of this vintage document piece a little bit more. This one's nicely ripped, but I just like the fact that it will curl. And again, I'm not bothered if this rips. This, I know, is not particularly delicate. It has ripped there, as you can see, but I'm not bothered about that. Just work it a little bit. You could scrunch it up in your hand if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that too much. Okay, so this one will sit inside there. So again, I'm just going to flip this over, and I'm going to glue the back, but not all the way to the edges. But I am going to put a generous amount of glue on here, because I do want it to glue well and stick well where I'm actually putting it. So again, just roughly centre that on there. Oh, you might be wondering why I've got this image off to one side, and it was just an image that I was auditioning to see whether or not I wanted to use it or not. So just going to give that a good burnish down. And I haven't inked the edges of this vintage document because I don't want it too distressed. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some Fabri-Tac glue on the back here, and I find this is the best way to adhere the voile to the back, rather than to try and put glue on the voile. It is far easier if you put glue on the back here. And just going to pop that on the top like that. Now, I don't have to be particularly bothered about getting that too central. And what I do now is I just hang on to my voile and just stroke the back with my bone folder to make sure that that voile is touched down onto my document, and then just get the residue off the bone folder. So I'm going to set this aside to dry for 1 second, and I'm going to bring in my base layer. Now, this is my base card, and same as with all of these other layers on this one, I've just made this marginally bigger than my last layer, and because I wanted to add texture to this, I have put a line or two of stitching on it. I'm going to flip this over, but what I've done on the back is absolutely optional. This was a piece of packaging from a tea bag box. So I had all the tea bag logo on the back, which I didn't want. So I put a layer of book page on the back there to make sure that the logo wasn't showing through. Now this will be dry now, and I'm going to apply glue to this. Now because I've stitched all the way round, I hope you can see this, I've stitched probably a couple of millimeters all the way round on my sewing machine. I'm going to glue inside the stitch line. You could glue all the way up to the outside edge of your card if you wanted to. I just chose not to. I'm putting a lot of glue on here because I'm not stitching this onto here, and I want it to be really secure. And you'll notice that I've put glue all the way over this. I've not left a central channel here. And that's a mistake. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use my finger and eyeball where I want my paper clip to go, and I'm just taking away a little bit of the glue there. Okay, so try and remember that if you can, everybody. So there we go. I'm just going to take my tag now, or my topper, and I'm just going to position it on top and just push it down. Now you can ink your edges, you can distress your edges, and I probably will do in due course. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to very roughly trim away some of this foil. Okay, so that's the basic tag made. You can go on and obviously distress your voile if you like that look, and I probably will do. Just go around picking it at it with my thumbnail. So I'm going to leave that for the time being. As you can see, I've just inked around my edges, and now I'm going to create the pocket at the back. Now, if you wanted to do a very basic, simple pocket at the back, you could do, and there's loads of videos showing you how to do that. But I actually want to create this little gusseted pocket with, let me just get my fingers in there. I want to create this little gusseted pocket like this on the back. So I'll show you how I've done that. I'm going to use just a plain white sheet of copier paper to show you how I made the gusseted pocket. And the reason I'm doing that is because if there's no detail on the paper, you'll be able to see where the fold lines are. You want a sheet of paper that will give you at least ½ an inch at the top of your tag and ½ an inch at the bottom. So I've got a generous margin here, so I will be chopping that down. In terms of width, you need a piece of paper that is 3 times the width of your tag. So place your tag in the center to start with, and to get the actual width of your pocket, take one edge and just fold it over and reinforce the crease that you've just made. Okay, so that's one side. Then put your tag back in, butt it up, just hold it in place and fold it over again on the other side. And again, take your tag out, hold your paper in place, fold it over and reinforce that crease. And at this stage you want to be checking that your top and your bottom of your sheet of paper are lined up, and that way you know that you've got a straight fold there. So that's what it should look like. You want to reinforce what will be the top of your pocket, and this is where that ½ an inch allowance works well. It doesn't have to be ½ an inch, it could be less if that's what you wanted, or you don't actually have to fold it over and reinforce the top of your gusseted pocket. I like to, because if you're using paper, and if you're using vintage book paper particularly, you might want to reinforce it. So again, just using the guidelines on my mat here, I'm just going to go with 2 centimeters, and I'm just going to move that out of the way and fold it down 2 centimeters. I'm now going to glue that in place, and I'm going to glue it all the way along, and particularly I'm going to take my glue close to this crease that I've just created down here. And the reason for that is we might need to trim the top of the pocket, and if we do, it means that this is still in place and reinforced. You'll see what I mean in a minute, if that is double Dutch to you at the moment. So there we go. I'm just going to give that a good burnish. You want to flip it over so that your piece of paper looks like this, and you have mounting folds like that for your creases. Lay it down onto your mat, and what I like to do is just level it up and line up my creases with one of the vertical lines. And again, because this is a sample, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line where that crease is so that you can see what I'm doing. So what we need to do now is to create our gusset. This is the pocket that's going to go on the back of the tag, and our gusset is going to be in this bit and this bit. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking for, there's the crease line, I'm looking for 1 centimetre to the right hand side of the right hand crease. Okay, and I'm going to put my ruler on this point here and down here on the actual crease so that it is diagonal. So I'm just going to draw that line in so you can see when I take my ruler away. So I'm going to create that first part of the gusset. So I'm going to put my ruler back in place on that diagonal line. I'm going to take my piece of paper and I'm just going to bend it up against my ruler. I'm going to hold it and gently take my ruler away so that nothing's moved, and I'm going to reinforce that crease like that. Now don't worry that your paper is going off at an angle up here. It will do because you've created an angle down here. Now to create the next part of the gusset, I'm going to leave this flap in place, and from this point here I'm going to measure to the left 1 centimetre, so to that point there. Okay, and I'm going to draw, I'm not going to draw, I'm going to crease from this point back down to this point at the bottom. So I'm going to draw that in so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to crease along this line, but I don't want to crease to the left, I want to crease to the right. So I need to put the ruler on that 1 centimetre mark and then come right down to the point at the bottom, hold your ruler and push your paper up against your ruler. Hold everything in place with your left hand and just gently take your ruler away and create that crease and burnish. Okay, so that I'm going to lift this up now so you can see what it looks like. You have your gusset like that, and it tapers down to a point at the bottom end. So I'm going to do exactly the same on this left hand crease. So very quickly I'm going to line it up. I'm not going to draw in the lines this time. I'm just going to line it up. This time I'm going over to the left. So I'm coming over to that 1 centimetre point there. I'm going to put my ruler on that at that end and then down onto this point down here where my crease is. Line it all up like that. Take my paper, fold it over to the right this time, Take your ruler out, reinforce that crease and burnish. Okay, now we're doing it again, but to the right hand side. So there's my point. I'm going to go over to the right by 1 centimetre, and I'm again coming down to this bottom point down there. So I'm going to put my ruler on the 1 centimetre mark at the top, down on the point at the bottom, hold it in place, push my paper over to start my crease going, take my ruler out and make my crease. Now sometimes you might find that you have to just adjust your fold, and of course you can have a bigger gusset than 1 centimetre. So that's my gusset on the other side, and if I hold it up like that, that's what it looks like on this side, and then if I flip it over, that's what it looks like on the other side. I've turned it over to the wrong side. I need to trim the spare paper down a little bit. So what I like to do is to trim these pieces 3/4 of the width of what is going to be your pocket. Okay, so I'm just going to eyeball this and then close that, gusset up, fold this over. And I'm going to do the same on this side, just tear away about 3/4 or 2/3 across the back. As you can see here, I have quite an overlap. So you can reduce that overlap as much as you want, but you do need an overlap there. So before I go any further, what I want to do is I want to trim this across the top. And this is where gluing well, when you turn over, that reinforcement pays off dividends, because this reinforcement is well and truly stuck. You've got no loose edges. Okay, so let's get rid of those two pieces. And this is what the back of your pocket will look like. And I mentioned a moment or two ago that you might need to adjust your folds if you haven't done it quite accurately. And if I hold this up to the camera, can you see I have got about 1 millimetre in that back fold that isn't right, and similarly I've probably got 1/2 millimetre on this side. Now I'm not particularly bothered, but you can adjust that if you want to, just by pulling the flap back slightly. And I'm just going to do this side so that you can see, and you can actually do it quite easily. And there we go, like that. Now, as I say, I'm not particularly bothered because this is a very rustic, distressed looking tag, and that little tiny overlap won't matter, and I'm not bothered about it at all. I'm not even going to bother about that side. So what you need to do now is you need to work out how tall your pocket needs to be so that it fits on the back of your tag. So very easy, all you do is you just line up your tag like that, take the bottom portion, the unreinforced portion, and just make a fold like that, and then turn it over and burnish that fold. Now I've got way too much here at the bottom. I don't need all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim away what I don't need, and I'm going to keep about 1.5 centimetres on the bottom there. So I'm just going to mark across there, draw a quick line. You can eyeball this if you want to. And I'm going to just hold my pieces together and trim across the bottom, like so. Now I'm going to trim, snip a corner from the fold, just about, could be centimetre across the bottom. Let's do that for ease. So from that crease along the bottom, just roughly across there, and I'm just holding everything in place. So again, I'm bringing my scissors in, and I'm just going to snip that corner away, flip it round, and do the same on the other side. Okay, so this would be our flap to seal the bottom of the pocket, but I obviously don't want this layer here, or this little portion here, which was part of the flap, and I also don't want this little portion here, which was the bottom part of this flap. So if I pull this open, you can see the two portions that I don't want, and I also don't need these little points down here. So I'm going to trim everything. I'm going to trim everything off. So it looks like that. Fold everything back up and fold your piece along the bottom. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to draw a line in here, and you'll see why. If I open this flap up, it shows where this flap meets this flap. I'm going to put glue just inside that line, down to the bottom and all over this area here. And then I'm going to glue along the bottom here to close up my gusseted pocket. Now, as I've said before, that line is just for demonstration purposes, so you can see, and if I do this, you can see that that gives you a little gusseted pocket coming down to a point at either end. And this side, where the flap is, where all the flaps are, this is the side that I would glue to the back of my tag, like that. So I'm going to go away now, and I'm going to make one of these with a vintage document. I've got one partially prepared here. As you can see, I've got my two gussets in place. If I flip it over, I've got my reinforcement along the top there. So I'm just going to fold up my pocket, tear away about 2/3 of my width. The same on this side. I've got my uneven edge at the top there, and I'm just going to trim that away. Before I glue this in place, I need to work on the height of my pocket, so I'm just lining this up at the back. Now, as you can see, I haven't left a huge margin at the bottom here. I've left enough for what I need to do, so I am just going to skip the stage where I trimmed off the excess at the bottom, and I'm just going to go straight in and snip off some corners. And you don't even have to measure those, they don't have to be even at all. They can be as shallow as you like, for the simple reason that nobody's going to see these. They are going to be glued to the back of your tag. So I'm just reinforcing that crease. So there is my pocket all ready to be glued. And I'm all ready to glue that onto the back of my tag. And this is where that slight millimetre or half a millimetre doesn't really matter on this style of tag, for the simple reason that it's hidden by the voile and by all the rough edges on the other side. So I'm just going to give that a good burnish. And similarly inside. And there we go. And fluff up the other side a little bit more. I have here a paper clip that I've just tied some voile around, and I like to put the short edge of the paper clip on this side, but that is just my preference. And all I'm doing is making sure that I've roughly centered my paper clip so that it slips down in that gap that I left that wasn't glued, and that will sit on the top there like that, and that's what the back looks like. I have a little scrap of really lovely vintage lace in my stash, and I thought that would be nice to put on the back here rather than labels as I did with these. So I ideally would have liked to have had a pocket along the bottom, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep that piece that I worked so hard to make fit down the bottom, and I'm going to glue it down the side here, and I'm just going to let this slight curve come down to this bottom corner like that and snip away down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this. And then I'm going to just trim this away. So here we go, everybody. This is the finished tag. I've put a couple of little labels top and bottom here, number 45 in that corner, and then if I flip it over, that's the lace that you saw me put on. I've put a couple of little labels down at the bottom there and one up at the top, and I've left this for the time being because I'm not quite sure what image I want to pop in there, but I was having a look at this and thinking I could have made a tag out of this. If I just fold that over, I could have made another little tag out of that, but for now I'm just going to leave my image tucked in there and resting underneath my paper clip. And this little piece of lace, I was auditioning it along the bottom, thinking it might be nice down there and tie in with what I've done on the back here, or alternatively I could have put it across the corner, but I've decided I will leave this piece because whatever I create to go in this back pocket, I might use that to embellish it. So I'm going to keep that off to one side for the time being. So there we go, everybody. I hope you like seeing this one come together. Very, very easy layered tag at the front, and at the back just that little gusseted pocket. And I'm just going to ruffle up those edges a little bit more like that. And this was the thing that gave me the inspiration, my altered guest check, and these are all the tags that you saw me showcase before. These are all out now that this video is posted. These have all gone out to my tag partners for the March OHJ Tag Swap. There we go, everybody. I hope you found the tutorial of some interest, and I really do hope you'll participate in the next tag swap, which, as I say, the invitation video is going out on the 17th of April. Love to have you with us, and I'm going to try each tag swap to do you a little show and tell and perhaps a tutorial of the tags that I've made for each one as we do the tag swaps this year. So until the next video, everybody, take care. Bye bye now.